as the Israel-Hamas conflict wages on. Israel's former intelligence chief has just revealed some massive spy secrets. Let's check them out. So a couple of days ago, the former head of the Israeli Mossad, Yossi Cohen, went on the Trigonometry podcast, where he spoke a little bit about Israel's spycraft, particularly in its war against Hamas in Gaza, as well as Iran. And he actually spoke a little bit about how Israel was able to obtain Iran's secret nuclear plans. Now, this is quite an extensive interview, and because it's over an hour long, I'll just make sure to be as concise as possible and really just take a look at the most critical parts. But if you would like to check out the full interview, make sure to go onto Trigonometry's YouTube page right here. This is the icon to look out for. But before we proceed with the video, could I please remind you to subscribe to my channel for more content like this? It's free. And all you have to do is hit that subscribe button in the bottom left corner under the video. Without further ado, let's get started.
Yossi Cohen, welcome to Trigonometry.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, you're the former director of Mossad. Your book is called Sword of Freedom. It's good to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
For our audience who may be less familiar with the world of the Secret Service and so on, what is Mossad?
Well, Mossad is an intelligence service. I mean, working outside of the state of Israel. I mean, in comparison to the other organizations that you may know, I mean, the MI6 in the British version of the James Bond, as we call it, or the CIA. All right. I mean, and these are the equivalents of the Mossad. Mossad is an intelligence organization, quite a big one. I mean, in comparison with the others, I mean, the quantity of the people, I mean, the quality of the people is amazing. And we operate outside of the state of Israel. I mean, behind the enemy lines, as we call it. I mean, we don't do anything inside the country.
Your foreign intelligence service.
Absolutely.
So just for a little bit of context, some of you may have also heard of the Shin Bet, otherwise known by its abbreviation, Shabak. And Shabak is the service that operates within Israel's borders. So that would be the equivalent of the FBI in America.
And you mentioned military intelligence. One of the things that really stands out in your book is you're very, very critical of the Israeli military when it comes to October 7th.
Correct.
What do you think were the key failings that caused that to happen?
So just to provide some context, there have been quite a few investigations into the security failures on October 7th. So the first one would be the Civil Inquiry Committee investigation, which is specifically one that was set up by civilians. So people who were family members of hostages, people who lost loved ones on the day. And then there was also the Likud, which is the political party of Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister. And they themselves also tried to launch their own investigation. But earlier this year, in February, the IDF officially concluded their own 19-page report on what happened. And just to summarize what they spoke about, they explained that the security failure was primarily a result of underestimating Hamas's capabilities. It wasn't so much because Israel had a lack of military capabilities or intelligence capabilities, but simply what they did is that they viewed Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon as primary threats to Israeli security. And for that reason, they decided to sort of downgrade Hamas to a secondary threat level, so they didn't take them as seriously.
Well, I think on the national level, I mean, when I was national security advisor, I mean, you have to realize that there is a country to guard, that there is a country to preserve, that there is a country to make sure that it will exist the next day, right? I mean, and you do have, on a national level, you do have two lines of defense that has to be emphasized by us, Israelis. The one, I mean, by the way, it applies to every other country too. Like, it's good to do that, the same thing, the same structure in all countries, UK and others. The first line of defense is the intelligence line, which the one that you don't see. I mean, this intelligence line is all of us, as described before, are working to know what the enemy is planning for us. What's his plans? What does he have in his mind? I mean, what does the Iranians, what do they want to do? I mean, what are the plans of terror attacks? I mean, that either Iranians or other terror activity or terror organization, I'm sorry, are planning for us. And this is something that has to be conducting by intelligence forces to make sure that we know every day, every morning, every time, every minute, what are the enemy plans, i.e. enemy, each one of them that I've mentioned before. It could be Hezbollah, Iran, Syrians at the time, or Hamas. This line unfortunately collapsed. I mean, when I say collapse, I don't say that we didn't have intelligence at all, but we didn't have a significant, meaningful intelligence to tell us or to give us the alert that the enemy is about to come.
Why didn't you have that information?
Because I believe that we didn't invest enough in Gaza Strip. I believe that for years, I mean, we're not there, we're not physically there. And it's worthwhile explaining a little bit. I mean, when we have disengaged from Gaza, what we call the Hitnatkut in Hebrew, we left the 365 square kilometers for the Gazan people themselves. That was a one-sided decision made by former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. I mean, I'm sure you remember the time. And we have left Gaza Strip completely. When you leave the territory, okay, you're losing part of your intelligence holding on the ground. You see less people that they can recruit. I mean, you engage with less Gazan people that can be recruited.
So just before we continue, I think it's important to draw a comparison. So in Judea and Samaria, which is the West Bank, you see how there are Israeli settlements in certain areas. There are the Arab settlements in other areas. There's certain militarized zones. They're split into 3 areas known as Area A, B, and C. But without getting too much into the specifics, basically the big difference between the West Bank and Gaza is that in the West Bank, you do have limited Israeli presence and military presence. And of course, there are occasions where the military has conducted operations within the Palestinian territories as well as Israeli. On the Gaza side, however, it's a completely different story. You see, when Israel disengaged from Gaza in 2005, they withdrew literally any Israeli citizen that was ever there, any military outpost, and they left it completely to the Gazans. What followed was a Gazan election where Hamas and Fatah, or rather the Palestinian Authority, which is Mahmoud Abbas's party, they faced off in an election, and Hamas actually won that election. And what ended up happening was that Hamas and Fatah got into a brutal civil war, if we can call it that, where Fatah was basically exiled from the Gaza Strip. Many of their members were thrown off buildings, assassinated by Hamas fighters, and ultimately Mahmoud Abbas and the members of Fatah have never been able to return to Gaza ever since. And there's also never been a Gazan election ever since. And so what Yossi is saying about the lack of intelligence that Israel has in Gaza makes a lot of sense, because all of a sudden there isn't a presence at all. Not of Israel, not of any potential Arab partners, nothing.
Hamas people, of course, that can be recruited. And I think that we missed all that. Okay, so the deterioration of the holding in Gaza was imminent. And by the way, I saw it happening in 2014-15 when I was active as the National Security Advisor. And I saw during one of our round of violence, as we call them, Tzuk Eitan, protective edge, that was the formal English version of that round of violence, that the level of intelligence is not high enough. It's not good enough, unfortunately. I realized that because Mossad is not dealing with the Palestinian thing, right? Abroad, yes, but again, Gaza and Judea and Samaria, we do not. I mean, we're not involved in that since we are working behind the enemy lines abroad. Problem is that Gaza behaves like it is abroad. Gaza behaves like it is a foreign country. I mean, you can go with your either military forces, you can go with your Shabak, whatever 4x4 armored vehicles, you can go arrest someone inside his house in Gaza Strip cities, which is super different than territories like other territories like Judea and Samaria.
So this is very much what I was saying, where the IDF are able to conduct different operations within Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, whereas they're unable to do that in Gaza because prior to October the 7th, they had no access beyond the Gaza border. And what's also very interesting is that he said that Gaza acts as if it is abroad. This is largely true because prior to the war breaking out, there were a lot of Gazans who became foreign workers in Israel. And so you'd see them especially in the construction sector, where there'd be all sorts of different construction projects going on. You see they're building new apartments, there's cranes, there's all sorts of construction happening. And the people are speaking Arabic, right? The builders. And while there are certain Arab Israelis, meaning Arab people who are citizens of Israel and live within Israel, sure, they are part of the construction sector as well. But many workers did actually come from Gaza and have work in Israel. And then, of course, have to cross the border in the morning in order to enter Israeli territory, and then cross the border once again to get back to Gaza in the evening when they go home.
Or whatever, East Jerusalem, or even inside the country. And that creates a kind of a gap in between what we knew and what they have planned. And that gap actually created this disastrous activity, horrifying activity in October 7th. I have alerted that. When I returned to the Mossad in 2016, I offered, let's put it that way, I volunteered and I offered my services to the country. And I said, my perspective is that the Gaza level of intelligence is not sufficient. It will never be sufficient if we will not participate in that, because we have the ability to work under cover. We have the ability to work differently inside difficult territories like this one, like we do in Hezbollah in Iran and other places that you have been, of course, aware of recently. For reasons that would be kept with them, I was rejected. The Mossad was rejected, to intensively help in that intelligence war inside Gaza.
Wow.
By the Prime Minister?
But Prime Minister didn't give the order to do that, but I was rejected by my counterparts.
That's really interesting that he was rejected. I wonder if that will actually play a role in any further investigations that happened. And if any more people are found culpable for the October 7th security failure, let's see if anything comes of that.
In military intelligence and Shabak altogether. So first line of defense has collapsed. This is what has happened. Meaning is that if you don't have the right alarm, and we didn't have it, this is what's happening.
But did you know that, Israel, did you not know they're building terror tunnels? Did you not know they're stockpiling weapons? Did you not know that they're training? Did you not know that they're scoping out the defense barrier, etc.? Did you not know any of this?
We did, but we didn't know enough. To my understanding, we did, and we knew that these things are happening. And by the way, it's a very interesting question, because in 2014-15, the major thing that we were worried about are the penetrative tunnels. This is what we were looking for.
You were worried they'd dig under?
They did. They dug under. We knew that. By the way, they kidnapped a soldier, Gilad Shalit, at the time being coming into our territory under the famous fence.
So for those who may not know, Gilad Shalit is a famous soldier who was held as a hostage. Basically, Israel had to give, I think, about 1,000 prisoners in exchange for Shalit in order to get him back. So it was a very big news story back in the day.
And we didn't know where they are. Okay, imagine, it's a huge territory, by the way. 365 square kilometers, 6 times more than Manhattan, the island, right? Which is less than 60 square kilometers. So it's a big territory. Imagine all this, being penetrated by under tunnels, 1.2 meters wide and very, very, very long ones. Starting at the end of the world, close to the sea, and penetrating all the way down under the state of Israel. We had to know that, and we did not. that was the reason for us to crash, I think, part of the borderline in 2014 and 15 and ongoing. So we knew all that. And by the way, there is another thing that I refer to, which is, should the state of Israel be or not proactive, all right, to defeat our enemies? And I found myself, often more, I would say, proactive than the others. Not alone. Others from these organizations were cooperating beautifully with this kind of thesis that says, rise and kill first, as we all believe in. But at the same time, things that have happened, as to your description, were not being eventually crashed or disrupted or disabled inside Gaza, because the thing I believe is to maintain the Gazan territory quiet. It applies, by the way, the same for Iran. It applies the way we have behaved in Israel with Hezbollah too. So that's why you don't see many operations happening in this kind of territories beside clandestine operations, all right? But you don't have the absolute ones unless we feel that there is a must-do and we are conducting this kind of rounds in order to disrupt the enemy's capability.
So come back to October 7th, there was the intelligence failure that you've just described. One of the other questions a lot of people have is why it took so long for the military response, why it took so long.
So before they move on to the military response, I think it's important to cover a detail that they've actually missed out in this interview, which is the actual reason behind why the intelligence failure happened. So according to the reports, there were a group of female military observers who were stationed along the Gaza border, and they are tasked with surveillance. And what happened is that they noticed how the patterns of behavior of certain people along the border changed over time, specifically in the early hours of the morning of October 7th and a little bit the night before. So, for example, there were reports that all of a sudden they noticed how people were running drills and exercises in certain areas along the border. So that was a red flag. The other red flag was that there was quite a lot of mobile SIM cards that were activated all around the same time in those hours leading up to the October 7th attacks. And so again, that's another red flag, because if you have to think about why all of these SIM cards are activated at the same time, it obviously means that there are a whole bunch of interconnected people who need them for communication, right? So clearly they're planning on collaborating on something, working together on something. Basically, there's an operation taking place. And so the big issue was that these female border observers, they reported what they saw to their commanding officers. But what we don't know is whether or not the commanding officers actually took their information and acted upon it, or perhaps they themselves elevated it further up the chain of command only for it to be lost amongst one of their superiors. So that's the sort of intelligence failure that is being alluded to.
For troops to get into the area where the enemy were?
I don't know. This is a question that I can't really answer. I'm not part of the army. I was never. When I was 18, but since then, not much. I don't really know. This is a very tough question that has to be answered, I believe, by the National Investigating Committee that will have to be eventually formed. In a given time. I think that we really need it right now, but
why hasn't it been formed so far?
I'm not sure yet. There are many questions about that. I know that most of the people of Israel, if you interviewed Israelis, most of them would have told you that this is the actual thing to do. And more than that, I believe that we need this committee to investigate what went wrong, not who went wrong. And it's a big difference. I'm not looking, to hang people, say who he's the one to be blamed. He's the one. We know them, all right. We know the generals. We know the people have been working. In the different divisions inside the different intelligence body and the army themselves. Part of them took responsibility on what they did, right? They took open responsibility, like Chief of Staff Herzl Levy and Chief of Shabak Ronen Bar. They took responsibility and they said, we're responsible. I mean, the failure is on us. But the investigation committee, I mean, should investigate what went wrong. Why is it that we didn't know enough? For example, should we, in the coming future, look differently in Gaza? Given
So just before they move forward, there's another aspect I wanted to address about the response time of the military. So on the day of October the 7th, it took the military quite a long time, some of the units a few hours, in order to get to the southern communities within the Gazan envelope, where there were kibbutzim, which are those small communal farms and towns that had been taken over by Hamas, where people were murdered, where people were taken hostage. And one of the logical reasons why this is that we can talk about even without a full investigation is because when the attack happened, it was actually the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. And so what often happens on Jewish holidays is that certain soldiers get to go home if they're more religious, or perhaps they get time off. And so there is a possibility that because a lot of the bases were fairly empty, they had a lot less manpower, it was easier for Hamas to overpower the soldiers who were stationed there at the time. And this indeed is what happened. That's also why quite a lot of soldiers, unfortunately, were able to be taken hostage. There's also then the fact that certain of the other bases where soldiers were responding from, they're just simply located quite far away. Yes, Israel is a small country, but of course, when you do have to travel tens of kilometers, it can take time, especially when you have limited highways with limited lanes. And of course, we need to remember that when these soldiers do get the alert, like, look, something's happening, they don't just jump in the car and rush to the border. You know, they have to be debriefed. A lot of them need to get back to their bases, get their weapons, if their weapons are stored on the bases. And so a lot of administrative tasks need to happen before they can actually be deployed to the emergency zones.
That the territory will be a territory that we will have to be securing. I mean, we'll have to make sure that the Gazan people or the Gazan Hamas, okay, will not, if they will still be there, hopefully not, but if they're still there, we have to make sure that this is not happening again, right? And more than that, I mean, I think that it needs maybe kind of a reform in our way of thinking. What is Shabak territory? What is intelligence military territory? What is Mossad territory? And this is something that has to be thought of and reformed, because things are maybe different than they were after 67, right? And it's a mixture of conflicts in between us and the Palestinian Authority and the people living in territories A, B, and C. That's part of the Judean Samaria area. And if you go back to Gaza, Gaza is not part of the Palestinian Authority non-officially. Officially, it's theirs, but it's so all this map, which is a kind of a cocktail of troubles, has to be reformed. And in order to reform that, I think that you need a body from above to tell you, you went wrong there and there and there. We better change it into that manner. So we will have the intelligence needed and defense needed. Okay, that's the first line of defense. It's a very, very big question that I have. Is why did it happen? Or as I think I described it in my book, and I said, I'm not surprised, but I'm shocked. I'm not surprised that we didn't have enough intelligence. I said that blankly. I'm shocked that the level of intelligence was so poor, unfortunately. So we didn't see, it's not a lone wolf that I have to find. When he's driving on his scooter from Baghdad, cutting into Syria, going all the way into Turkey, to conduct terror activity, or here into London, in London itself. I have to see that. One, it's 1,500 terrorists altogether, simultaneously. Imagine, I'm trying to, the size of the people supporting this 1,500. How many people knew about that secret, right? Logistics, training, technical support, telecommunication. I mean, all that. I mean, think about all the. I mean, it's huge. I know.
And just to interrupt, Yossi, as a complete layman, I'm listening to what you're saying. You're making great point after great point after great point about this, and I'm going, well, why have Israeli secret services not infiltrated Hamas?
So just on that point, there actually are certain occasions when they were able to infiltrate by way of collaborators, right? So one of the most famous collaborators, I would say, is Mossad Hassan Youssef. Now, what's really interesting about him is that he was born in Gaza to one of the founders of Hamas. And so he grew up within the ideology, he lived the lifestyle, but eventually he decided, look, morally speaking, this is not for me. I don't believe in this. And so he decided to defect. So he did actually help out Israel in terms of intelligence gathering and eventually defected across the border. And now he lives abroad. I think he's mostly based in the United States. But before I ramble on, I think if you do find it interesting and you'd like to learn a little bit more about him, it's worth getting a hold of his book called The Son of Hamas. I highly recommend it.
Why isn't there a guy there going, hey, they're going to launch an attack? You best get... Why didn't that happen?
That's the same question. I mean, what went wrong? I mean, everything went wrong. If you don't know what the enemy is planning for you, all right, you're not doing your job. My job is to tell you, I mean, not you only, but you know what? You too. I mean, one of my best partners here in the UK, and we'll refer to that because I'm sure that you're going to ask about the amazing and important declaration of Prime Minister Starmer about the Palestinian future, whatever Palestinian state. But at that time that I was conducting this intelligence bureau of mine, or the Mossad, one of my best partners was the MI5, your local security here. And local security has to be informed by all others who's going to do something against your own kingdom. All right? So if you knew that, you have passed your job with distinction. If you failed, you know nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Knowing nothing means that there is a terror attack in the streets of London. Knowing nothing is like, where is the Iranian nuclear sites? Knowing nothing is what is Hezbollah planning for us. This is knowing nothing. So you have to invest a lot in order to know. All right? So if you haven't penetrated them correctly, okay, by all means, I'm not saying only human, like human intelligence is my profession, right? How to recruit people from within the enemy, whatever bodies and entities. If you don't do that, it means you know nothing. I mean, I think that knowing significantly is the right version. You may know, but you don't know enough. And we didn't know enough.
So that takes us nicely into Iran. I mean, the biggest coup of your career as director of Mossad, that we know about at least, was stealing Iran's nuclear secrets.
Oh, yeah.
How did that happen? And more importantly, what did you find? Because actually, it's interesting now, Israel wasn't really much in the news until 2 years ago. And I think for
Israel was not much in the news.
it was not. It was not here.
Not in the UK.
No, not in the West.
Really?
No.
Yeah, no.
I'll be honest with you, it might be unpleasant for Israelis to hear, but no one really cared about Israel until October 7th happened.
Yeah.
I'm quite surprised by that
now it's
also.
obviously become a bigger conversation.
Oh, you were dealing with your Brexit and stuff, right? I mean, that was more important.
We've got a lot of problems.
Yes, I know. Immigration.
Let's not get into that because we're going to start crying.
No.
Yeah.
So your coup, stealing Iran's nuclear secrets, happened before October 7th, or significantly before.
Mm-hmm.
What did you find, first of all? Because this was a big point of contention when Trump and Netanyahu bombed the nuclear facilities. And I want to ask you about that too.
Okay, I will. If you fast forward your question into June 2025, this is the full answer. And I will go backwards.
Fine.
Okay? I mean, with your permission. In 2016, after a few months that the JCPOA was already signed, it was signed in July 2015 by the P5+1, UK included, right? England, France, Germany, USA, China, and Russia. It's weird to think that all of these have worked together, all right? But now they totally split. And the P5+1 has signed the what we call the JCPOA, the nuclear deal. It's not a deal. Eventually, it's a plan of action. JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. That was a plan of action. When it was signed, we didn't like it. We, Israel, we didn't like it.
Very briefly, why?
Because we felt that the agreement is a terrible agreement that leaves Iran with a lot of capabilities and capacities. And we wanted them to go on zero. No enrichment, no sites, no nuclear sites, no scientists, no Zadeh's group, what we call the weapon group.
Just to break it down, apparently 90% uranium enrichment is what's needed in order to create these sorts of nuclear weapons, such as a nuclear bomb. I'm not sure what Iran's current level is. I think it was around 60% last time that I checked, but I may be mistaken.
We wanted all that to be eventually dismissed, dismantled, whatever. I mean, to zero. Right?
Whereas it gave them some leeway?
It gives them a lot of leeway, I mean, till the sunset. I mean, not only that, I mean, the Iranians eventually kept their capabilities. And that's the problem. It is true that if you go, I mean, we're not going to do a nuclear seminar, but the one thing that bothered us above it all, that they've kept capabilities in the bunkers alive. That means that they can not only enrich uranium in the bunkers, they can even improve the enrichment. What they did.
So just to explain, one of the main facilities that Iran has used is Fordo, which was at the base of a mountain. So those of you who saw the US attack on Iran during the 12-day war will remember that the Trump administration sent through B-2 bombers in order to damage these facilities. But there's still no exact confirmation as to how much uranium is left, whether they got all of it, particularly in Fordo, because it is so deep under the surface. After all, it's at the base of a mountain.
Eventually, this is exactly what worried us. And more than that, there is a sunset clause, as we call it, the sunset clause, as we call it, which is something that says that in a given time, the agreement eventually will be dismissed, or will be cancelled, or will be eventually abolished or abandoned.
It's not permanent.
Not anymore. And we didn't like that. We thought that Iran should be very low kept by the level of enrichment, if at all, okay, and that all nuclear sites, including the scientific work that they conducted, should be completely closed and shut down. Okay? That was one of the main arguments. All that was very well opened and kept by the Iranians according to that agreement. That's why we opposed that dramatically. I was one of the negotiators. I mean, at the time, I was the prime negotiator for the State of Israel for the nuclear deal. I had conducted this kind of relationship with the UK, French, all the others. And we said, I mean, because every country received the kind of a vertical to deal with inside their agreement. Headed by the USA, of course, okay, the Foreign Ministry, I mean, the Secretary of State and his team, at the time, John Kerry, Wendy Sherman, and the others. So we didn't like it that much. And we have told them that in our perspective, I mean, everything that Iran is doing is under one vision. I mean, they're heading the bomb. I mean, they're trying to pave their way to the bomb. And this is something that they have declared again and again and again from within the system that they're doing. They said, yeah, of course, because of that, we need an agreement. And we said we have to attack the sites. If they don't stop, we have to attack. The gap that was not fulfilled till June 13th this year. But in 2016, after the agreement was signed, we saw something very weird happening in Iran, which is under Ministry of Defense and Dr. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, rest in peace. They have started to collect this kind of materials from all over the country under a very discreet manner. Super secret thing that's happening in Iran itself says, you will bring us everything that you have, hardware, software, disks, papers, documents, everything that we have done under this nuclear secret activity into one site.
So one of the primary reasons why Israel knew this is due to the presence of Mossad operatives on Iranian soil. Now, what's really interesting is that the Mossad didn't just collect information in order to learn about the nuclear program, right? The Mossad also managed to collect information relating to military capabilities and actually launching and knowing when to launch the preemptive attack that opened up the 12-day conflicts, but a little bit more on that later.
That's alerted me. That was the thing that I said, something wrong's happening there. I don't know what is it yet, but I want to know what's there. 2 years later, that was the archive, right? And we said two things at the beginning. One, don't lose your eye from the ball. Make sure that we know everything that he is doing or they're doing, because there were few who knew about that in Iran itself. And number two, when we see it lands somewhere in Iran, okay, it has to be, by the way, a site that is not recognized as an official site because of the agreement, because the IAEA, the agency, the nuclear agency, atomic agency in Vienna, under the agreement could visit any site. All right. So they say if the site is not on the official list, okay, they don't even know how to ask where to visit.
You can't inspect a site.
You can't inspect a site that you don't know about.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
And this is that's why they placed it in a kind of a warehouse inside Tehran, in a kind of an industrial area. Okay, we found out that this is what they do. That raises our suspicious even higher. And then I've instructed my teams, bring it home. I want to know what's in it. I think that they are hiding the filthiest secrets of Iran. Bring it home. 2 years later, we did. Okay, it took us a long time to conduct this kind of operation. A lot of troubles on the way. We'd been in Iran hundreds of times. Collecting information, recruiting people from within. Know exactly what's happening in this kind of warehouse. When we brought the archive in January 2018, we've operated, but it took us a few months to get it out. It was not FedEx or or
well, you talk about it was a half a ton material. So.
Half a ton of materials, yeah. True. We didn't bring the hardware in, but we brought a lot of documents and disks, a lot of videos and hard disks. Amazing stuff. We'd been surprised ourselves.
So what did you find?
We found out that there was, and there is still, massive activity that is in light of a nuclear bomb. Not like Iran has ever declared before. They have denied ever doing anything like the path or paving the path towards a nuclear bomb. This is what they...
Yeah, so they actually already did that again. The Iranian leader went to the UN General Assembly a couple of days ago and said, we only need uranium for consumer purposes, non-military purposes. So that's probably the latest incident that he is referring to.
They did. But we found out that they did. And now we have absolute evidence, a lot of evidence that show that this is what they did.
Can you give us some specifics on what they're doing?
Absolutely. In a nuclear activity, if you want to hide it, according to the Iranians, you don't have, and you can't work under any inspection of the IAEA. And we'd found out that they have done a lot of work, many sites that we had found out were not known to anyone, never declared, but a lot of activity was happening there, right? And we did find many new sites that were conducting actual and physical nuclear work without declaring it to the IAEA. So in one hand, Iran is conducting kind of negotiations with the West, or with the West, East, and Russia, and signing an agreement saying, our intention is not, of course, for a nuclear bomb. this is all clean. On the other hand, now we see the reality. Iran is conducting kind of a discrete alternative job or alternative nuclear job that eventually create the path to the bomb. And this could not be allowed. That was the reason for us to go on with it. Because in the intelligence philosophy, there's the use of intelligence will always be more valuable than the intelligence itself. Meaning, if you know something, it's okay. If you use it, it's so much better. If you know that there is a terrorist coming, it's okay. If you use it and you disrupt his terror activity, that's very useful. Same goes for the Iranian thing. So this is what we did. We have, the Prime Minister did. Prime Minister Netanyahu had a very important press release, press conference, and he revealed that we have that. I mean, it didn't show everything, but that was a kind of a shocking thing to all negotiators. What I did personally, is that I have ordered to copy it bit by bit, all of it, all the archive, and give it to one by one, to the head of the CIA at the time, to the head of the MI6 at the time, to the head of the DGSE at the time, the French Mossad at the time, every one of them, and to the Russians, Chinese, and partially to the Germans, and to the IEA, and telling them, okay, this is the archive. We tell you nothing about that. Do you tell us what's in it? First, do you endorse it? Or do you think we faked it, as the Iranian would claim? Everyone endorsed it, including the IEA. And this is the most important part. By the way, a few weeks later, President Trump exits the agreement, saying Israel has just provided us with new materials that shows that Iran lied all the way to the agreement. And now we understand their truth, or what they're really doing, and not the reality that they're trying to create for us. And number two, everyone, all services, including the IEA, endorsed completely what was in it and said, this is a problematic issues that has to be declared, or not declared, cleaned or cleared in between us and Iran.
All right, so going back to what I was saying about how Israel knew when to attack and how to attack Iran during the 12-day war, because Israel had Mossad operatives on the ground, they gathered quite a lot of intel about the military capabilities of Iran, where certain weapons and infrastructure were located. And so what actually happened is that Israel were able to pull off quite a miraculous preemptive strike well within the early hours of the war. They'd already been able to dismantle the Iranian Air Force, ensure that all jets were grounded. And what's actually very interesting is that at about the halfway point of the war, so around June 18th, 19th, it was reported that Israel had already managed to dismantle about 50% of all of Iran's missile launchers, which are responsible for launching these surface-to-surface air missiles. And so it was a very massive military feat. And that's also partially why Israel was able to defeat Iran to a very large extent so quickly. It was all thanks to this preemptive nature of, well, first of all, a very early attack and well-executed attack, but also due to the effectiveness of the Mossad, which Yossi Cohen used to be the director of. So I'm going to leave it there simply because the interview does go on for quite some time. But if you would like to check it out, head over to the Trigonometry YouTube channel and search for the interview. Search for Yossi Cohen's name and it should come up. Thanks so much for joining me for this reaction video. I hope you found it as insightful as what I did. And please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to get more content such as this. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.